This is the Vickers light tank. So this is going to be my third film, and to add a bit of variety, it'll have been the Spitfire and the Messerschmitt in films 1 and 2, and now we have a tank. I picked this one because I hadn't made this as a child. In fact, I don't think Airfix actually had this out. I think this is very recent. It looks tiny, and it looks like there isn't much to it. Somewhere on the box it will probably tell me how many parts, and I bet you I'll be surprised. 35 pieces, there we are. It looks like there's about 12. 35 pieces is pretty good. It's the Vickers light tank, which was built before the Second World War and to some really weird specifications, because the British Army did not get tank warfare. So this is a strange, small, fast moving tank. I should probably read the information on the instructions one day, but I won't do that now. We'll get the bag open. So what we've got is, for a change, we've got some green plastic. The last two, the aircraft, have been in appropriate grey. And there you go, some excellent detail again. Something I'm very pleased to see already is the tracks. They are moulded out of solid plastic, because I always struggled to get the tracks to attach properly, stay attached, not spring off after about a year of mucking about with the model and enjoying its company. And it seems the only sensible thing to do. The other thing is the wheels are very small and fiddly for something this size, so it's understandable that the whole lot's moulded together. It's very similar to their far earlier Bren gun carrier model, because this is virtually the same chassis. So there's not a lot of difference. They're very small, they're very fiddly, so it seems a wise move. I am very pleased to see that. We'll get that bit out of the way. We can just see a little bit of the body of the tank, which is very nicely moulded, and up the other way, the turret, which is being obscured by shadow, which is small, neat, didn't house a very big gun. Very often these only house similar models of tank only house machine guns. So you can see really this is a portable pillbox, not carrying a lot of firepower. Tragically, the Germans had a very different idea. Well, I've painted the Vickers light tank. I've sprayed it green. Turns out it's a Humbrol spray, so it's probably a fairly appropriate colour. I had intended to use a totally different spray, which is nothing to do with model making. It's a very dark, rich gloss green, because very often interwar tanks and post-war vehicles as well were sprayed a gloss, or well, painted a dark gloss green for whatever reason, and Bovingdon Tank Museum has quite a lot of interwar vehicles that are that colour. But unfortunately the paint had dried up in the nozzle, so I've used this sort of official colour, which is very good, a nice dark olive green, and then I sort of dabbled with one of the little pots from the Messerschmitt model, and it's a very slightly lighter green, so I've managed to get a tiny little bit of highlighting, which it all comes back to you, doesn't it? You can see it most on that hatch on the top there. Yes, and then I remembered weathering in general. There's a little bit of highlighting on the top of the turret too. So I've then darkened up the tracks and the wheels and the suspension, and although I don't think it will show up particularly well, the springs are black and the arms are a dark brown, and there can be a tendency for muck under vehicles to either be a very black colour, particularly if there's a lot of grease involved, or an almost non-browny grey, almost non-colour. So I'll edge my way towards that eventually. And then when the model's made, I think because it's a tank, I might actually do some weathering on it. See if I can remember how to do that. I'd only got into that at the end of my model making phase, so see what other talents we can resurrect. What's next then? If I've done the basic painting, I suppose I glue it together, don't I? Right, that's next. Here we are with the little Vickers tank. We've got a large part of the body put together there, which is a nice simple process, and there's the majority of the turret. I haven't put the top cupola on because you get a choice of 3, which I'll come back to in a second. I did have a problem with the turret in that I almost completed it but the wrong way round. So I'd done things like put the gun there and all of this over here and vice versa, because it's such a simple little thing, and it seems there's something very improbable about the whole design, so I got it wrong. Anyway, you can make 3 variants of this tank. The instructions just call them A, B and C. You get 3 sets of markings for them as well, and I'm going for A. And not only do you get a different cupola for each, so I'm going to go for the one with a complicated polygonal one, but you get a slightly different front plate there as well, and a few other little bits and pieces are different. So far it's tiny, but it's neat and tidy, and everything's fitting on very nicely. I thought I'd just show the instructions for the turret, because rather nicely it shows the 3 options for the cupola: the polygonal one, the round one, and then actually an absent one with just a hatch, which is that makes it interesting. I mean, it's worth buying 3 versions of, or actually 3 models of this, making 3 different types. And then these are the 2 options for the gun. These are, this one is, I believe, A and B, and then this one with the longer barrels is C, and that fascinated me. So when I went off and had lunch, I rummaged around and got hold of an old book that I've probably had since I was a kid, and had a quick read up about this and some other British tanks. And it's very odd that between the wars the British are so sort of out of touch with how things are going. They're preferring small tanks, light tanks. They don't go for big guns or anything like that. And there's just a couple of bits worth reading out from the book. The first is that this tank is, or has its origins in a design dating back to 1928, so only 10 years after the First World War, and about 10 years to go until the Second, just over obviously. And it says that these light tanks were numerically the most important armoured fighting vehicles of the British Army in 1939 to 40. I know they're up against the nice, neat and tidy little light tanks that the Germans had, like the Panzer I and II, but the Germans also had the 3, and I'm pretty sure they had the 4 by then as well, which had big guns, 75mm or thereabouts, I seem to remember. Which is, I just find it so odd that Britain is almost in denial about what's going on militarily. And there's another little section that says that the maximum armour thickness for this tank is only 14mm, and that these tanks could be regarded as no more than reconnaissance vehicles. But numerically, they're the top of the heap, so to speak. So I'll just show you the little book, or at least what you can get of it. Whoops, let's have a good look. There we go. It is a neat book. It does cover an awful lot of vehicles, and there was a large number of these books produced, I seem to remember, which are very good. And also they've got some nice little illustrations of variants of this tank. Not quite in focus there. That one interestingly shows it with 2 shades of green as a camouflage, and it's got the slightly longer, higher caliber gun. And then this one, oops, a nice diagram illustration there with the camouflage that's more green and khaki. So I'm fascinated by what British thinking was at this time. Very, very peculiar. We're at the stage now where every part is glued on to this tank, and they all went on rather nice and smoothly. There weren't any real problems once I'd realised I got the turret the wrong way round, and it's a snug, tidy little model. It is quite small, it has to be said. I think I'll bring the Messerschmitt along, or the half-made Messerschmitt along in a moment, just to give a sense of scale. But here you can see there's a nasty blob on the side of the turret where I had glued, tragically glued this onto there because I got it the wrong way around, so I'll smarten that up with a bit of paint in a moment. It is, as I say, it is tiny. That's its main characteristic. So let's give a contrast. There's the Messerschmitt out of shot. But it is good. It is definitely very good. That's not a very good view, is it? Let's do that. Let's get some action from the front and a little zoom. There we are. Now a little bit of dirt showing underneath. Here are the decals or transfers for the Vickers tank, as it says at the top, and it shows the 3 different types for the 3 variants of tank. I've just cut out and applied the ones that say common to all. There's nothing spectacular there, it's just 3 tiny little white squares. And I'm going to go for the central band, the ones with the red sort of diamond, and this is what we'll get. What's interesting is it's the Infantry Division 1940 BEF, British Expeditionary Force. These poor devils will suffer the problems of Dunkirk, so it seems to me a rather appropriate variant to have. Here we are, at long last. We've got all the transfers or decals on, and we have a very nice little Vickers tank. Compact, excellent detail, and a nice looking little model. I have messed up the turret. I couldn't get all the mess off from when I'd attached everything the wrong way round. So there is my learning point. Read the instructions. Although I was looking at them at the time, I probably just wasn't concentrating. And I think that is a good little model. So nice one, Airfix. Well done. And who knows, I might buy this again and do one of the other variants. The other thing is, I remember Airfix used to produce little modelling books, and I think there was one called Tank and AFV Modelling, and the author made a couple of these almost from scratch. I think he adapted the Bren gun carrier, and it looked like an awful lot of effort to me, so I never made one. But he then went on to make a little diorama of 8th Army folks in the desert, and I remember it looked quite good. So there's a few colour schemes that could be come up with as well. Options are pretty broad with this one, so I like it. Oh, slightly loose. marking on the back of the turret there. And I could go for a little bit of weathering, I suppose. If I do, I'll show it. There we go. Thanks for watching. Since then, I've had all my technical problems, and during that time I was making lots of little tanks, and in particular going for early tanks such as this Matilda and the Panzer II that everybody's sitting on, and going for some influential tanks or ones that have some kind of political relevance like the Churchill, and influential tanks such as the T-34. So look out for them in the future, and it's worthwhile doing it, kind of discussing the progress, the growth and development of these things, tanks, and thinking about how they fitted into the bigger sort of political and military frames of mind. And I'm really being boring again, aren't I? Oh well. So anyway, look out for more tanks, and I've got a funny feeling I'm better at tanks than aircraft.